Hi, I'm Trisha. I'm the co-founder of Objectiveshe. Welcome to our YouTube channel. If you're new here, we are a community-led project by women for women. We help women develop skills in 3 specific areas: in product management, product design, and software engineering. We also help find opportunities in Web 2 and Web 3. This fireside chat was actually pre-recorded in February of 2022, and it's moderated by our very own Lakshmi Ashok. Lakshmi is a product manager at Uber, and she'll be chatting with her friend and former colleague, Claudia Laurie. Claudia is the co-founder of Prive, and I hope that you will enjoy today's fireside chat, and let's head over to the actual talk.
Thanks, Trisha. Like Trisha said, we're really excited to have all of you here today, and we hope everyone's staying safe. My name is Lakshmi, and I'll be hosting this fireside chat where we will get the chance to hear about all that it takes to be a founder today from our wonderful speaker, a close friend, as well as an ex-Uber co-worker, Claudia Laurie. Claudia is the co-founder of Prive, an e-commerce infrastructure startup that provides intelligent tools to the next generation of e-commerce and D2C brands. Prive is focused on enabling recurring revenue in seconds through the most configurable and intelligent subscriptions platform. Prive is backed by Xfund, Bling Capital, Halogen Ventures, and Defy Partners. Today's chat will begin the moderated discussion with some exciting questions that we've put together. And towards the end, we'll open it up to questions in the Zoom chat. So if you have any questions, please do drop it in the chat below. Before we begin, just want to call out that everyone will be muted during the session, but feel free to turn your camera on if you'd like. And on that note, I'm thrilled to bring to you our very first event of 2022 with our guest speaker, Claudia. Hi, Claudia. We're so excited to have you.
Hi, Lakshmi.
I personally have had the fortune of working closely with you at Uber, but I also have witnessed your amazing founding success at Prive, and of course, my all-time favorite podcast, The Room. But for our viewers today, I would love if you could share a quick introduction.
Totally. Well, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for including me in this event. I'm excited to kind of kick off the first of many incredible conversations that I'm sure you're going to be hosting. So I'll give a brief background about myself. Like Lakshmi mentioned, we actually did work together at Uber, and now I'm the co-founder of Prive. So I went and started Prive just about a year ago. We actually had our 1-year anniversary just a couple of days ago. But Prive is a venture-backed startup that enables subscriptions for e-commerce brands. So essentially, we are the tech platform that underpins subscriptions for physical products. So think, what a lot of SaaS businesses have introduced as their purchasing model, subscription. We're doing the same for physical products. So we enable D2C brands like your favorite, beverage company, skincare company, dog food company to offer subscriptions for their physical products. And I can get a little bit more into actually what our tech does, but that's just kind of a high-level overview of Prive. Prior to Prive, I was a product manager at Uber for almost 3 years, where I worked with Lakshmi. Prior to that, I was also kind of in e-commerce a little bit. I had my own Shopify store for 5 years, which was kind of one of the inspirations for why I'm kind of back helping D2C and retail brands with subscriptions. And then prior to that, I was Harvard class of 2018. I studied computer science as well as architecture. So that's just a little bit about myself. Originally from Australia, grew up in New York, and now proudly in the Bay Area. So that's kind of myself in a snapshot. We can dig into anything that you want to go over.
Yeah, that's amazing. Definitely have a whole bunch of questions lined up. And so I'll jump right into it. Okay. I think to start at the very top, did you always kind of know you wanted to start a company of your own someday, or is this something that you realized that you had a passion for along the way and decided to invest more time in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, also on my podcast, like I interview so many other founders, and that's honestly like one of the most interesting things to dig into, because it's definitely a very split universe. Some people know that they want to be founders since they were like 4 years old. Others, it was something that they stumbled into. I think for myself, it's a little bit kind of in the middle. I think I always had entrepreneurial tendencies when I was younger. I was always that kid that had the lemonade stand and was trying to sell absolutely everything. I remember I would make like clothes for Webkins. So folks that are kind of like our age might be like familiar with that like stuffed animal that was very popular when I was kind of in middle school. I was like selling clothes for these stuffed animals to my friends. But I didn't really think I was going to be a founder, to be honest with you, like during college, right on the onset. I had a lot of friends who, by junior year, knew that they weren't going to be recruiting at any larger companies and would just start something right out of college. I think for myself, I knew that I wanted to be in entrepreneurship, but I also wanted to learn the fundamentals of like growing a business, scaling, learning from others that have been in industry for many, many years. So I always knew that I wanted to go somewhere that I could learn a lot from after graduation. And so when I graduated, I was super excited to join Uber as an associate product manager because I knew it was going to be an 18-month time where I could learn from the industry's best and really start to cultivate my skills and understand what it looked like to like work at a company that has hit product market fit and is scaling. I knew that I wanted to found something at some point in my life. I don't think I realized that it was going to come quite so soon, but I think I kind of saw the opportunity, took it and ran with it. And I think that's kind of my best advice for founders. There's no tracked path. There's no timeline to when you're going to start something. And so you just need to, always be thinking about ideas, like have interests, build a network of people you want to build things with. And when the time is right, when the time comes, don't feel like you can't do it because you thought, okay, I'm going to be at a big tech company for 7 years and then I'm going to start my own thing. It'll come when it comes.
That's true. And I think just the last thing that you said was particularly interesting because my next question was going to be if there was ever an inflection point or a moment that you realized that now's the time and I actually do want to spend all my time doing this, or was it gradual and you kind of built on it over time?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think COVID was definitely a turning point for myself. And to be honest, I don't think I would be where I am today if it wasn't for kind of how crazy 2020 was. I think working from home really enabled me to take a step back and think a little bit more deeply about things that I was interested in, what I wanted to do. I think if I was doing kind of that commute to work every single day, I probably wouldn't have had enough time to like really think through ideas. But I would say probably like smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, my co-founder and I were just really jamming on ideas. Like we had a bunch of things we were interested in. We would put together one pagers. We were just like intellectually very curious about a variety of different topics. And I think there was one area which was around kind of e-commerce, consumer engagement, enabling engagement with like short-term levers such as like pricing and incentives, all the way to long-term levers like subscription and loyalty. How do you enable that for consumers, especially as D2C e-commerce is growing so rapidly? And it really tied back to a lot of the principles that we were exploring and building and running with at Uber. And so that was just kind of an area of focus that was really interesting and kept on coming up as a topic of conversation. I would say probably, towards the end of 2020, after, a few months of like stewing on these ideas, talking to folks in industry, talking to potential customers, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And it felt like, I wasn't going to be doing my day job as a PM justice if I kept on wanting to explore this in the background. That being said, there was never really like a major aha moment where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to quit the next day. It was definitely a gradual build of me exploring a space, getting conviction that there was something to build here. And then, I think Christmas time, holidays, periods of reflection, we both decided to kind of take the jump. Ended up leaving kind of early 2021.
That's awesome. And maybe to now double click into that period of your life, in a nutshell, as far as I know, Prive helps D2C brands build sustainable recurring revenue through e-commerce subscription, but would love for you to kind of walk the audience through what Prive does on a day-to-day and what their core offerings are.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of enable like the end-to-end experience for subscriptions for D2C brands. So the same way that you might have a subscription to Netflix, how do you have a subscription to your favorite shampoo or the vitamins that you take every single day? There's a lever that I think a lot of you have probably seen on Amazon, which is subscribe and save. It's been like a core revenue driver for the Amazon platform. But what about brands that are not on Amazon or not in a marketplace? How can you enable that lever for them? And it was interesting when we originally fundraised, it was on a slightly different idea. And through kind of early iterations of that product and talking to potential customers, the one thing that kept on coming up was we really are interested in subscription and having a subscription aspect to our business because it helps us plan demand a lot better. It helps us kind of have more sustainable revenue streams. It's something that enables us to have higher LTV for our shoppers. Can you help us with that? And I think it was, incredibly opportune because my co-founder was running subscriptions at Uber. We had engineers that we were working with that also kind of had their roots at subscriptions in Uber, and we just had a lot of domain expertise around subscriptions, LTV, recurring revenue, demand forecasting, all of that type of thing. And it was a topic that brands were really fixated on solving for. And so we kind of did a little bit of analysis about like what were the current offerings and tools out there in order to enable subscription for brands. And the offerings out there were just like not that flexible, really difficult to use, really expensive. There's like a ton of different reasons as to why there needed to be a better solution in the market. And so we decided to kind of approach the subscription space and the recurring space for physical products with a different lens. And so our product basically is sold to brands or D2C brands, stores online. We're primarily starting with brands that are hosted on the Shopify platform. And we're an app that they can integrate with or install. And then we enable them to create essentially subscription plans. So, subscribe for delivery every 4 weeks to get 25% off, delivery every 6 months, gift subscriptions, a prepaid subscription, like, pay for a year's worth of product, get it delivered every couple of months. So we enable kind of the creation of those entities. Then we also manage the storefront experience. So the actual component on a storefront that allows you to purchase one time, that allows you to purchase, a subscription and configure what that subscription is, whether you want it every 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. And then we also enable the storefront component where you go log in to manage your subscription. I think that's a big part of our product offering. I'm sure many of you who have had subscriptions to physical products, whether it's a meal delivery kit or Dollar Shave Club, probably have had those moments where you're like, how do I cancel this? How do I swap it to a different flavor? How do I put it on pause? I'm going on vacation for 2 months. And so, obviously having a random login to some e-commerce site is also really difficult to kind of manage. And so we have a universal customer portal where you can log in by just putting in the email or phone number that you use to check out. We send you a 6-digit code, you log in with the 6-digit code, and then you can manage your entire subscription, whether it's swapping a product, canceling the subscription, updating your billing and shipping information. And that makes subscriptions so much easier for e-commerce brands because their shoppers are really able to self-service the subscription. So it reduces a lot of support costs for the brand. The other kind of components that we manage is also kind of comms to shoppers. So making sure that they're aware of what's going on with their subscription. They know they can swap products. We kind of have email and SMS comms there. And then the final piece I'll mention is kind of business intelligence and analytics. For a lot of brands, subscription is like 80% of their revenue. A lot of brands want it to be 100% of their revenue because it's just incredibly predictive and sustainable. And so how do we provide analytics recommendations to help them better optimize their subscription business? So understanding what products are the most subscribable, what actual offers, terms, periods make the best subscription, which users are highest LTV, and you should offer them an incentive type of thing. So it's kind of that end-to-end life cycle of what it means to buy a physical product from a brand on a recurring basis.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I definitely have a whole bunch of questions on each individual piece of that. But maybe to step back a little bit. So as you walked us through your prior industry experiences and kind of your career trajectory, you worked as a product manager at Uber, and you worked in some of the core orgs like marketplace and driver. Would really love to understand how some of those experiences fed into your entrepreneurial journey. And today, when you think back, what pieces in your mind has really helped you or informed your decisions?
Totally. I think being a product manager, whether it's at a big tech company like Uber or at another startup, is such an important kind of experience to have, and was so beneficial to being a founder. I think there's so many different pieces of it. I think as a founder, you have to wear many, many hats. As a PM, you're also wearing many hats. And I think at Uber, I had a ton of experience, whether it was working directly with engineering, working incredibly closely with design, working with product marketing, legal. There was just so many cross functions that I had a little bit of an insight into. And so now as a founder, I have a bit of a perspective of what all these different functions should be doing, and how I can work with a cross-functional team, because ultimately as a founder, your entire team is cross-functional. So I think at a high level, it was really helpful as a PM on doing that. But I also think being able to plan and being able to communicate is something that was really important for me to learn. And it helps me now that I was able to flex those skills, whether it's, writing a product release for a feature that you built, which is what PMs do every day at Uber, or, just being able to concisely summarize, a problem and put together a plan, sprint planning, action plan, for marketing, whatever that is. I think having that hyper-organized experience planning and communicating is something that's really important. I think at a lower level at Uber, there's a lot of kind of like tactical things that stay with me now. So when I first joined Uber, I was on Rider, working a ton on like the experience piece of the Rider app. And I think it has enabled me to have kind of an intuition around user experience and what it means to build a delightful user experience, which is incredibly important and really a key differentiator to our product. A lot of SaaS products are really like ugly, like hard to use. The user experience is terrible. And so a lot of the feedback we've gotten from customers was, wow, this is so easy to use. This is so intuitive. This is so clean, like streamlined. And that's been like a major product differentiator. And I think that really comes from the fact that both Alex and I had experience being experienced PMs and working very closely with design. The other thing is like, I'm basically the designer at Prive, at least, was for a long period of time until we hired more people. And so being able to learn from some incredibly great designers at Uber has helped me kind of scrape by doing designs for our initial version of the product. Moving forward in my timeline at Uber, I then kind of worked at Marketplace, which was probably the most influential time. I was really focused on thinking about pricing as a lever to drive incrementality, incentives as a lever to drive incrementality. And I think that's something that we're really focused on for our brands. How do we drive incremental revenue? What are the levers that we can use? How do we engage customers in a scientific and systematized way? And I think it's a really different perspective to bring to e-commerce that a lot of other tools don't have. And so like, if you look into our product, there's like a lot around, experimentation, measurement. And I think those are disciplines that e-commerce brands have not really flexed, but is incredibly important for them as they continue to grow and scale. And then the final thing I'll mention is, I think I dealt with a lot of, very hectic situations at Uber, whether it was regulatory projects or working with employment legal or like a bunch of those other kind of crazy things. And I think that really built my endurance to problem solve outside the box and to figure out how to resource things that were just not that simple. And of course, as you can imagine, that's literally the day-to-day of a founder. So I'd have to say those are a few of my highlights of my, experience at Uber and how I apply those today.
Yeah, definitely super insightful. And it does sound like, a lot of pieces of being a product manager overlap with that of being a founder. And there's a lot of like context switching and a lot of different stakeholders to work with.
Totally.
So maybe switching gears a bit back to early Prive days, what did your customer discovery process entail, and how did you kind of validate this idea?
100%. I think we're still early days, but to throw that, we're still constantly learning from our customers. And I think as a founder, you always have to do that no matter what stage you're at. But I think, very early on, we were lucky to have a few design partners. So brands that are customers of ours today, that really were gracious in working with us and kind of explaining like what their priorities are, what are some hair on fire problems they have. And we would basically put solutions in front of them and see, how they would work with the product. Was it something that actually solved their hair on fire need? And I think through like a few iterations of our early product, by giving pilots to these design partners and folks that would tell us the truth, we were able to quickly learn like, hey, like this is just not a hair on fire problem that we're solving. 5 out of the 7 people we just chatted to this week have all said that like subscriptions and figuring out pricing for subscriptions is something that's really important to them. Like maybe we do something there. And so we would constantly ask questions, have conversations. And I think when you can get into a world where you have a few key, hopeful end customers willing to get on the phone with you on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis and basically just tell you what they need solved, that's really helpful. Of course, you can't just build what they're asking for, because I think any great product, you need that vision, you need kind of that inspiration to be able to give something that is 1,000 times better for them, that they don't even know what to ask for. But it was really directionally helpful for us to like say, hey, we don't need to build this product. Like, this is not a problem. We should head into this space. So that's kind of how we navigated through like that very nascent like idea phase. As soon as we built like the first version of our product, we were also very lucky to have a few of those, willing to try us, especially folks that like might not have had subscription before. They didn't have like a ton of order volume. And so it was really a great sandbox for us to like test new features and like learn in an actual storefront and with actual customers, but in a way that wasn't so overwhelming that like we were just fixing bugs and like, dropping subscription contracts and like businesses were kind of losing out. And so I think making sure that you're testing in environments that, are tractable and are friendly is also really important. And so after kind of going through a few cycles there, at some point you just need to bite the bullet and start selling to customers, which we did. Through those early sales, we discovered a lot of what was working, what was not working, what integrations we needed to build, what features we needed to prioritize. And even now, like every time I do a sale, every time a customer, onboards our product, I try to keep in touch with them throughout, the first few months, if not longer, of their journey. So I know like, how are they feeling? What did they wish, was different? And so we can continue to like prioritize features that way. But customers will always be your best friend. You just need to learn how to ask the right questions, and kind of build that, very transparent, tell me exactly how you're feeling relationship, because the most helpful feedback is the one that is not, sugar coated. I think that was like another learning, like especially when you're like the founder and you're nice and you're friendly, a lot of customers will just tell you nice things because they don't want to hurt your feelings. But that's definitely not going to help you succeed. And it's not going to help your product to get to the place where it needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it definitely, for a lot of these things, given that, we were very much at the peak of COVID and you also started a company during that time, which is a feat in itself. What were some of the initial challenges, or maybe even things that, being virtual helped you with? Are those things still, relevant given that COVID is kind of easing out, but working virtually, starting a company virtually, so many different pieces to it?
Yeah, I think there's like definitely upsides and downsides to it. I think the interesting experience that was very different because of COVID was obviously fundraising. We pitched to everyone remotely. Like we basically did not meet anyone in person until like after we had, a term sheet or after we closed our round, just because it was, very much a sensitive COVID time, more so than right now. And so it's kind of hard to build that personal connection or like pick up on those signals that you would often get in person when you're just interfacing with someone on Zoom. And sometimes it can feel a little bit transactional because it's, a scheduled 30-minute meeting, like you both have to like click off. You're not able to like go for a coffee, have that small talk in the beginning. And so I think in many ways, you have to work a lot harder to build those personal connections. And then you have to ask a lot more questions, get on a lot more calls in order for you to understand the signals you need to make a decision on whether, this is the right investment partner for you. The upside was that it's a lot more time efficient instead of, having to drive down to Sand Hill Road and pitch in person and then commute back home. I was able to do at sometimes 10, 11 pitches a day, which is a lot. Would not recommend it just because you get incredible Zoom fatigue, but there's no way in the world I could have gotten through 40, 50 pitches in such a condensed time frame if we were doing it in person. And so was very lucky that our process was, quite quick. And I was able to talk to funds, outside of the Bay Area, in New York, in LA, incredibly quickly. So that was kind of like a unique thing. I think now it's really important that we do get that face time in person with our investors to continue building that relationship. And I think the next time we fundraise, it's probably going to be a hybrid of like remote versus in person. So that was a unique experience. I think the other thing that is interesting is hiring. For the first few full-time hires, it was all remote. We were all working from home, and onboarding to a startup via Zoom, when there's just like so much that needs to be communicated, is also a little bit tough, mostly because you have to be a lot better about documentation. And as an early stage startup, that sometimes takes a little bit too long for how quickly you're moving. I think the fact that my co-founder and I were both PMs made it a little bit easier, because documentation and making sure things were in written requirements was, just like so natural for us. But I will say, we're now in person. We have an office in San Francisco. Our employees are working with us in person, and onboarding new hires is just so much easier to do it in person. And we're actually able to build a company culture that way. The benefit, however, is that we, are able to hire folks that are remote. We're not 100% set that you have to be in person in San Francisco. We're really hiring the best talent that we can. Hopefully they are in SF, but if not, no worries. And so I think that adds a lot of flexibility to who we're able to bring on board. And I think a lot of businesses have really benefited from the ability to have international distributed teams supporting their core in-person team.
Yeah, absolutely. And to touch a little bit more on the Prive team, can you kind of walk us through what the current composition looks like and how you got to that? I do know from some of our conversations that, from the initial days of Prive, it was you doing a lot of these different tasks and trying to pull together everything while also hiring, but also ensuring that, they are the right fit for the company. So would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So we're still early. We're still actively hiring. We are a team of about 7 now. Most of the team of 7 is in person in San Francisco and is on the engineering side of our business. We have a few engineers who are remote as well. Right now, we're actively hiring for some of those more non-technical roles. So have a lot of kind of interviews for sales and like an AE role, SDR role. We're also actively hiring for a head of go-to-market as well as a head of partnerships. And so I think the Prive team will certainly start growing quite rapidly kind of over the next couple of months. So I think the first 6 months of us was really around how do we build a team that will enable us to build products so that we can try so many different bets. We can, switch gears, we can pivot easily. And I think having a strong engineering team that is able to, just chat through requirements with you, build the next version of the product, change a feature, enabled us to like try and test incredibly rapidly. So that was kind of why we prioritized really focusing and growing our engineering team. We're obviously still focused on it, but that was kind of why we hired engineering first. Mm-hmm. I was kind of leading in its design, and so was able to kind of fill that stopgap for a period of time. Now, however, we're starting to see signs of product market fit. Sales is outpacing kind of engineering to some extent. Like I can't support the amount of inbound that we're getting, which is, such a blessing, but it also means that like, I can't focus on a lot of other parts of the business that we need to focus on because there's just so many sales calls that I need to do. And so now that we're seeing that there is that demand, it's important to start to build that go-to-market team. So now someone else can kind of lean in, lead sales, lead partnerships, to kind of grow that side of the business. And then I can zoom out and then think more at a strategic level.
Yeah. we discussed briefly the entire process of, getting user feedback and getting people to try out the product. But curious to understand how you went about finding that first set of users that, you found that they wanted the product as much as you kind of were able to onboard them and get them to be a part of both the user experience for getting feedback, but to be a true real first customer. Because there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of information gathering. When did that click?
Totally. I think we tried a bunch of different things. I think we were very lucky that we got investment really pre-product. And so the investor network was so helpful to us. Investors were able to introduce us to portfolio companies of theirs or, other founders that they knew who would then know someone. So I think there was a portion of kind of our early customers who were really open to being design partners because we had a common investor or they were also founders and kind of, understood that early discovery process. So that was kind of one channel. The other channel was a lot of these organic community groups. So I'm in a bunch of Slack groups and Discord groups for D2C and CPG founders. These groups are amazing because the folks in these groups are so, willing to help and just excited to invest in the community and excited to try new things. And so it's funny how kind of some of these online groups self-select for early adopters. I think that's exactly where you want to play. You don't want your first design partner to be someone who's not an early adopter, who waits till the last minute to try new technologies, because they're the hardest sale to make. The best are the ones that are willing to try a million different apps and try a million different products because they just inherently love trying new things. And so a lot of these online communities are great for that. And then I would say the third channel is honestly just word of mouth, starting to build kind of referrals. One early customer of ours, introduced us to 4 other of his friends, and then they all became customers. And so that was kind of a cool thing that happened. Of course, there's also a ton of cold reach out, cold calling. I dedicate probably 2 hours a day to just reaching out to, whether it's customers or folks I'm trying to hire. And I think that was very much how we got a couple of those early folks, months ago. If you reach out to 300 people and you're really earnest in your email, hopefully a couple of them will get back to you. So it's kind of a mixed distribution strategy for getting kind of those early, 10 customers.
Yeah, for sure. I think you alluded to this earlier, but if you were kind of to look back a year now, or perhaps even when you were initially thinking about Prive, are there any things that you wish you had known or someone had told you, or just makes sense in retrospect now?
I think 2 things, and these are more just domain areas. One is sales. The second is marketing. I did not come from a business background at school, obviously studied engineering and architecture, which is incredibly orthogonal to anything that I'm doing right now. But I did not know how a sales motion was supposed to be run. I did not know how to even think about messaging, personas, targeting the right persona. How do you actually get on a call with them? How do you close a sale? What questions you need to ask? How do you validate the prospect? Just a bunch of that stuff I had truly no clue about. And so I think the first couple of, attempted sales were really rough. I was just not asking the right questions to get the answers that I needed. I wasn't really sure what the best way to engage with them was. I wasn't sure how to close it, how to handle objections. I didn't have battle cards. And so a lot of that was just learning through, some awkward, rough conversations at the beginning, reading books, talking to sales leaders, and just trying to learn as quickly as I can. So if I had to go back, I would say, start doing that learning and that training earlier on. To be honest, it would have been awesome if I did an internship in college in a sales capacity, because it just unlocks so much for you. And it's such a different way of thinking than engineering thinking. And then I think the second area is definitely recruiting. Even, as a product manager at Uber, I wasn't hiring other product managers. I wasn't hiring engineers. I wasn't hiring salespeople. And so figuring out what that hiring playbook looked like was also something new. It was great that my co-founder and I were going through it together, because we were able to refine things, share some knowledge. He hired a few of our engineers and is now able to kind of tell me what worked and what didn't work as I'm hiring salespeople. But that was probably the other really net new area that I just had no exposure to in the past.
Yeah, and definitely sounds like a lot of having to make mistakes, learn from it, refine as you go, chat with other folks also from the industry who might have done this before.
Totally.
And so from all these things that you've laid out, it definitely sounds like, being a founder is like a full-time job, and that means full-time, that's 24 hours in a day. But one of the questions we love to ask at Objectiveshe is, what do you do to kind of take care of yourself outside of work and make sure, you prioritize that so you don't burn out and you're able to give back to work as well?
Totally. I think it's just such an important thing. Being a founder is definitely not a sprint. I would also say like it's not your traditional marathon either. I think it's interval training in order to like last the distance. And so I think taking care of yourself is just incredibly integral to just like being a successful founder. I think the notion that you are at your desk grinding away 15-hour days is just like an unhealthy standard that's perpetuated. Most of the successful founders that I know are very disciplined with when they work out, when they go to sleep, when they eat, because if you're slaving away for like 20 hours a day, like you're like that output is just not going to be quality. It's much better to work fewer hours that are much more high quality. So I'm here saying you do not need to work, crazy hours in order to be a founder, especially in order to be a successful founder. I think for myself, like sleep is so important. If I don't get 8 hours of sleep, I'm like a complete wreck. And so just being really, really disciplined about that, even if that meant that I was starting my day later than I would have wanted to, that's absolutely fine because it'll just catch up to you. That being said, there are sprints like where there'll be a few days in a row or a week in a row where it's going to be hell week, but you know that you have to get these things done and that will unlock something that's a stepwise function for you. And then you'll have a period of time to rest. And so it's not about, not hustling when you need to. It's just about, making sure that you have periods of rest and you're also preparing for that sprint in advance. For me, working out is really important. I used to like spend like an hour a day, 7 days a week working out. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think I'm a lot more reasonable about it, but I try to always make sure that I work out at least 4 or 5 times a week for at least 30 minutes. And like so religious about it, whether it's in the morning or whether it's in the afternoon or in the evening, I just try to carve out time for that. And then the final thing I'll say is like one day on the weekend is like totally protected for me. I can, think about work and it's hard to not think about work, but I really try to not touch my email, talk about work, actively, do anything like that. And I try to do something fun every single weekend. So maybe it wasn't like the 2-day weekend where I would totally do nothing before, but I try to at least make one day like truly, truly mine and like always make sure that I'm doing something fun that is energizing me and not necessarily draining me. So those are just like a few things top of mind.
That's awesome. And maybe one more question on that note. Were there any new hobbies or skills you cultivated during COVID that, have kind of stuck around and you still enjoy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe not a new hobby, but I think a hobby that I double clicked into during COVID was definitely painting. I loved art growing up. I wanted to be a fashion designer for a period of time and, I used to go to art classes all the time. And I think like for the first couple of years working, I just really did not make time for it. COVID definitely enabled me to do so. And it's something that I did with my co-founder as well. We would like paint on the weekends, like these massive paintings, like paint the walls, just any kind of creative outlet like that. And as a result, we have, probably what should be a little like gallery exhibition at some point in the future. So that was something that was really fun and collaborative there that I still try to make time for every weekend. And then the other thing was actually like working out outside. Like I used to always go to Barry's or SoulCycle or kind of like these classes in the gym. And now I'm much more of someone that loves long walks, loves to run outside, will do anything to get some more sun and vitamin D. And I think that's also made my schedule a lot more flexible because you can always make time for a 20-minute run during the day, less so like sticking to a 1 hour long workout class at a predetermined time. So I think that's something else that was new because of COVID.
Yeah, totally agree. I think another thing that we've chatted about a bunch, but I would love for the audience to hear about is The Room, which is Claudia's podcast and one of my most favorite podcasts. Truly leaves me energized and excited every time I listen to a new guest. But tell us a little bit more about that and how it came to be and what you have planned.
Yes. So I started The Room before I left Uber to start Prive. This really was a genesis early COVID, like I'm saying, March of 2020, where I had a close friend, Madison, who was also a product manager, who was going through some career changes as I was starting to think about, what's next for me after Uber. She went from product into venture, and was having a bunch of conversations with mentors of herself about, going into venture, making those career changes. I was starting to chat a lot more actively to mentors myself, founders, successful operators, hearing about their career, hearing about how they made the next steps. And during COVID, we would like chat on the phone, or we would see each other in person because she was in my kind of quarantine bubble, and just kind of share notes on a lot of these conversations that we were having. And I think there was a bit of an aha moment where we realized a lot of people just aren't having the conversations that we were having. We were very blessed to have access to certain people who were in kind of that career path that we wanted to follow. And so we realized that there's just so many people that are never invited into the room where it happens. How do we maybe share some of those insights and wisdom more broadly to aspiring entrepreneurs and aspiring investors, inspiring product managers, and just kind of shed light on what the actual founding journey looks like, or the actual kind of fundraising journey looks like. So we started The Room to be kind of the room where it happens, a little play on words, it's like a Hamilton reference. And really the focus was interviews that Madison and I would moderate with founders focused on their firsts. So we really dig into their first aha moment, their first fundraise, their first hire, their first sale. And we're talking to folks that are, founders of public companies, unicorns, people who have, founded multiple unicorns. And it's really insightful to see what this stripped down truth was of what those early journeys are. And we kind of share those conversations in an effort to inspire others and provide a little bit more insight to others as to like what those early days actually look like. So we are on our 5th season now. We're sponsored by Silicon Valley Bank and Cooley, which is kind of a leading tech law firm here. We've had like almost 50 conversations, which is really exciting. We're like constantly trying to, talk about things that we think will be tactically helpful to aspiring founders. So that was kind of the genesis there.
Yeah, again, have to say it's one of my most favorite podcasts, and I've taken away a lot from it. Even in my product management experience, I find that there are nuggets from these first-time founders' experiences that feels relevant regardless of where in your career journey you are. So absolutely would recommend giving it a listen. I want to switch gears real quickly and take a look at some of the questions we have in the Zoom chat. One of the questions says, tell us more about some key lessons and experiences of running your Shopify shop. Where did it net out?
Totally. So I started my Shopify store when I was in college. I had an idea that people were buying so much like branded apparel and swag, but none of it was really stuff I really wanted to wear. It was all very much like that same.
I'm sorry.
And so I wanted to create
You look amazingly beautiful. I'm not
something that was a little bit more fashionable that I actually wanted to wear. And so I, found a factory in China, put together some designs for like these embroidered hoodies and jackets. And you could select kind of which school logo you wanted on it. And sold it through Shopify, sold it on campus as well. I think the most interesting thing was internalizing how difficult it was to grow that business online and actually get customers, and try to figure out like what levers I could pull to make this more successful. And so I even remember like 2014 installing all these apps, like trying all these different marketing tools. And how kind of rudimentary a lot of that ecosystem actually was. And then also just like how tough it really is to scale and grow a D2C business. And so it gave me a lot of empathy for our customers of like, what are the problems that are actually top of mind for them, as well as like how simple you need to make things in order for them to be valuable, actually used. Like there were just so many tools that like I just couldn't be bothered spending hours trying to learn how to figure out. And so that's kind of why for us, like one of our core principles is like simplicity and ease of use, because ultimately we just want to help grow the business. We don't want to be an experience that is like this, you know, enterprisey tool that is really designed for businesses that have, you know, hundreds of people like working through the problem. So it gave me a little bit more of an insight to empathize with who we're selling into now.
Totally. Ruben asks, do you think being in Silicon Valley played or plays a big role in the success of your business in today's distributed work model?
Hi, Ruben. We used to work together, so awesome to see you here. I think that's a really good question. I think yes, to some extent. I think we were really lucky that we were able to leverage talent that we had worked with in person who has had like a lot of experience at these big tech companies. Like many of our engineers came from Uber. I wouldn't have met them if I wasn't out here in Silicon Valley. I wouldn't have met my co-founder if I wasn't in Silicon Valley. And so I think being here was really helpful in building that network, and you know, being able to bring a lot of folks on board. I think now it's probably a lot more flexible. Like I know so many of my founder friends are building teams in Miami or, you know, going back to New York. And I think maybe 5 years ago, that would have been a lot more difficult. I think it's much more possible now. And I think as a result, we're more open to hiring people who are remote. However, it's really nice to have that core group of you know, teammates in person. So I think it was helpful in kickstarting, but I don't think it's a precursor or a prerequisite to building a successful business at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. Vaibhav asks, how does Prive differentiate from, say, Recharge?
Totally. I won't bother kind of getting into the weeds of, you know, technical specs or kind of feature comparisons, but I think Recharge is like one of the businesses that we're trying to disrupt. It's really based on kind of customer feedback and who our user persona is. And so we try to take a very different approach with how our product works, how folks interact with it, what are the features that they're using. And I think the biggest differentiator is really around ease of use, and the ability to kind of set it, forget it, have us kind of manage the experience end to end. But there are like a lot of kind of tactical differences that you can kind of see on our site or kind of in a feature comparison sheet that's coming out soon.
That's awesome. Ara asks, what are some of the things you wish were different or you dislike about being a founder?
I think the biggest thing is that you're constantly on, even if it's a weekend or you're taking time off.
Yeah.
And I don't mind it. It's just different. Like, for example, I was in Las Vegas the other day for a trade show, and after like 7 hours of running around trying to sell our product, I finally sat down for dinner and literally got a phone call from a customer asking about, you know, something that we were doing with their migration, and ended up being like a 2-hour conversation, which was awesome. Like it was a great conversation with their customer, was able to learn a lot, was able to solve their problem, but it was like 11 p.m. at night, my time. And so things like that happen no matter kind of like when you say your day is done, or, you know, no matter what time of day it is, especially when you have international customers. So I think, you know, the times where you could take 3 weeks off to travel around the world and truly no one would bother you is not really my reality anymore, but it's not too bad.
So a quick question I had on a more forward-looking question. So obviously e-commerce is a hot space right now and tons of opportunity. What do you see planned for the rest of the year for Prive and just yourself in general?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. The market is growing really quickly, and we're really focused on onboarding more and more customers. It's been awesome to kind of see the interest and the appetite there. So growing the team in order for us to scale. That's kind of one aspect. The second aspect is, continuing to scale the Prive family and, bringing on more people across different functions. So we can continue to try new things, build product, experiment. We're still early on. And so the time to experiment, try new bets is definitely not over. And then I think the other thing that I'm really excited for is also some of those new bets. Like I think Web3 is really interesting. I think there's some things that we're working on in that space. Beyond subscriptions, there's a few levers that we're playing with. So I'm excited for us to kind of build the team, try new things, and continue to scale our existing business.
That's awesome. Before, just want to do a quick time check. Maybe before we end, we have a question we love to ask during all our Fireside chats is being a woman in tech and now obviously a woman in business. What advice would you share with women out there and first-time founders in general that, maybe it has to do with COVID or just with starting a company or the experiences that you've had in the past? What is something that, truly resonates with you as a woman that you think is a true superpower?
Yeah, I think just like very tactically, something that I've really prioritized, and I encourage all female founders to prioritize, or even just females in tech to prioritize, is finding mentors that you can identify with, but also finding sponsors. And I kind of see the difference of like a mentor and a sponsor, with being a sponsor as someone who's kind of in the room, like helping with outcomes, as opposed to just giving high level advice. And I think I was able to benefit from a lot of really powerful, strong women in tech who were able to put me in rooms where I was probably too junior to be, but really enabled me to have my own voice, make decisions that were above my pay grade, in the effort to grow myself. And I think if you can find people like that who can really help you, coach you, put you in situations that might not come every day, I think that's something that is so helpful. And then also just having that network of other like female founders, whether they're 40 years older than me or 4 years older than me, it's really helpful to be able to bounce ideas off, tell them about the things that I'm going through, have a safe space for me to like, say things that like I might not feel comfortable saying to, a male, for example, in my founding journey, and like really have people who get it and have kind of experienced similar things. So it definitely takes a village to raise a startup. And I think having that network as a founder is really helpful.
Yeah, I would believe that. This was supposed to be our last question, but I do see another question in the chat, which is honestly one of my favorite ones. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but
Yes.
Which room episode has been your all-time favorite and has had a professional or personal impact?
That is such a hard question. It's like picking favorite children. I'm going to say two, and there are two very different podcasts. One was our episode with Sierra, which was really fun because she's not your traditional tech founder at all. She's a Grammy award-winning, pop star. And so that was kind of, a personal fangirl moment for myself, being able to sit down with her, after her kind of storied career in entertainment. But it was also really interesting to see how many pieces of advice and wisdom she had throughout her career and time as an entertainer that was actually incredibly relevant to being a founder. And so that's kind of one great episode to take a listen to, incredibly fun. And we talk about a lot of things that she's never told anyone, which is kind of interesting. And then the other episode that is my other favorite is our episode with Hope Cochran. She is a investor at Madrona Venture Group, but was also the CFO of like multiple public companies. And one nugget of wisdom that really stood out to me from that conversation was her idea and principle around finish the job. She calls it FTJ. And that's really around the mindset of like, if you do something, do it till it's finished, do it properly. And I think as a founder, it's very easy to cut corners. It's very easy to say, hey, I'm too busy. I'm moving too quickly. I can't worry about these things. But just having that intentional mindset of like finishing the job that you started has really, I think, set our business apart from others, because it is these little things that your customers will notice, that your team will notice, that really will start to excel you above others. And I think there are just like these little details that go a long way, because a lot of other startups miss them.
I love that. Yes, so many, like I said, just so many pieces of wisdom and so much to take away. All right, I think on that note, we actually have come to the end of this wonderful fireside chat. Thank you, Claudia, for this amazing session. It's been a pleasure as always chatting with you. And thank you all for tuning in today. We hope we left you excited and energized about exploring your side hobbies with renewed perspective. Please do also follow Claudia and Prive on Twitter, but also check out her wonderful podcast, The Room, on Spotify. And if you're new to Objectiveshe, feel free to learn more about our community and upcoming events on Objectiveshe.xyz. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter or connect with us if you'd like to join our community. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was such a pleasure.